Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Couch GMs podcast. I am your host, George Kerth, along with the two other Jonas brothers, Tyler Snyder.
How's it going, everybody?
And Cody Roadcap.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It's week 17. We've made it through the regular season of the NFL, and the Couch GMs podcast is just three best friends who love talking football, and we wanted to make a show for you guys.
If you're wondering what you can expect from this podcast, well, normally you'll get some fantasy advice, but guys, if you're still playing fantasy in week 17, you need to talk to your commissioner and shut that down. Don't do it. Fantasy should be over. So what you're going to get instead today is just some weekly breakdowns and predictions, some bold predictions for this week, and we're just going to have some fun talking football.
And we want you to all get involved on our social media channels. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Couch GMs. You can tell us who you're picking this week. You can challenge us to picks. And with that being said, why don't we go back and look at our picks from last week, where Tyler and Cody tied with our special guest picker, Becca, last week, and got 11-5 records. And I was last week's loser at 9-7. And if you follow us on social media also, you'll see my punishment coming soon. Just a little teaser there for you guys.
Yeah, and George, that puts us tied for the overall standings with 1 week left. I assume it's 1 week left. I don't know if we're going to keep the pick total running through the playoffs or start a whole new one. But right now, me and George are tied for 131 and 77 on the season, and Tyler's way ahead. So congrats, buddy, on the regular season victory. Beat me in fantasy, beat me in picks. Can you take it easy on me, please?
Hey, man, I appreciate it. And to any of our fans out there that are listening, if you have a suggestion that isn't waxing your armpits or having a pillow fight for the final season punishment, you just go ahead and comment on anywhere that we have social media. Let us know what you think we should do for our final season punishment. We'll go bigger and better than all of our other punishments, which is saying a lot. But something that I didn't beat you in this week, Cody, would be our bold predictions. And that would be because we got them all wrong again. You picked Derrick Henry to have 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. He didn't even break 100. I picked Buffalo to hang 50 on New England. They did have a big game, but they only put up 38 points. And George, you said Houston would win by 21 points or more. They didn't even win the game. So bad week for bold predictions.
We're right back to jinxing everybody. I don't know what to say. We were doing okay for a little while there, getting at least one right a week.
Not for me, though. I've been bad all season long. But my Derrick Henry bold prediction did the jinx worked, allowing the Packers to get the victory on Sunday night. But that's enough for week 16. Let's look ahead to week 17. And we had some big headlines coming out of the week. You know, the Jags locked up the first pick. Looks like Trevor Lawrence is headed to the AFC South. Tyler, as the Titans fan, how you feeling about that?
I don't want to talk about it. I don't feel good about it at all.
Okay, George, help a brother out. How should Tyler feel about this?
I mean, I don't think he should feel too great. It's not going to be that big of a deal. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to step in and lead the Jags to a title in year one. That seems ridiculous, but it's a big step up from what they've had, and it's going to make that division a lot tougher. It might end up being 4 deep here in the end, in the AFC South here in the next few years, depending on it the Colts do to replace Phillip Rivers. That's not going to be an easy road for the Titans. Maybe in the shorter run, they expected maybe a couple years of being well ahead of the pack, and now the Jags might be a little bit more competition than we expected.
My only hope is that the Jags go ahead and ruin Trevor Lawrence's career just like they ruin everybody else's that comes there.
Wow, that's not very nice for Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, he'll succeed when he goes somewhere else, but at least while he's with the Jags, I need them to ruin him.
Gotcha. And, you know, someone else hoping to succeed elsewhere would be Dwayne Haskins. He got released this past week after all his off-the-field shenanigans and then playing pretty bad against the Panthers this week. Do you guys think Haskins' career is done, or do you think someone else will pick him up? What are your thoughts on Dwayne Haskins?
Well, I actually found it really interesting that Ron Rivera lost his job in Week 16 of last year after losing to Dwayne Haskins and the Redskins. He then goes on to be the Redskins head coach, and Dwayne Haskins loses his job after a Week 16 loss to the Carolina Panthers. How about that?
The NFL is a weird thing, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, there's all those kind of coincidences, but, you know, Haskins, he wasn't the most talented guy coming out. He didn't even go in the top 10. He did go in the top 15, right at number 15. I expect some teams will, look at him, give him a shot, maybe as a backup role. Maybe a team like Pittsburgh, who a year or two out of Ben Roethlisberger, but then hopes to groom Haskins since they're not going to be at the top of the draft for a quarterback this year, something like that. But I think we may have seen the end of Haskins starting because unless he changes a lot of things this offseason, he just doesn't have what it takes to be an NFL quarterback.
Who do you think deserves more of a chance on another team, Josh Rosen or Dwayne Haskins?
Ooh,
Rosen.
I'll say Josh Rosen. Yeah.
Josh Rosen has gotten the short end of the stick. I mean, he got drafted by the Cardinals. I mean, he didn't look great, but that team was awful. They got a new coach. They drafted Kyler Murray. They trade him to the Dolphins. They get a new coach. They draft Tua. Now he was released. Now he's on the 49ers. He was just added there last week, so I doubt that he'll stick around there. Who knows? Maybe that's not for him to actually get a chance going into next season. I know a lot of the fans and maybe not the coaches are in love with Jimmy G. We'll see how that situation plays out. So maybe the 49ers is the best spot for him.
Definitely agree with Rosen there. Yeah, because he's never played on a good team, and they've just replaced him when the new regime comes in both times. It's like it's tough for him. I don't know what to say about what's happened to him so far, but he's probably going to get lost in the shuffle and not get another chance to start, and that's sad because I think he actually is a better talent, far better talent than Dwayne Haskins.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's enough about Dwayne Haskins and Josh Rosen. So let's go ahead and jump on into our Week 17 predictions, which, by the way, everybody, in case you forget, we will post all of our picks on social media for you to laugh and ridicule us on who we picked. You can challenge us, but be ready to be punished if you do lose. But, guys, let's go ahead and get on into our picks. Every game is going to be playing on Sunday. So we're going to start with the 1 o'clock games. We have the Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills. Bills are 1.5-point favorites. And guys, I'm just going to go ahead and pick right away. And I'm taking the Miami Dolphins. I feel like the Bills have less to play for. I don't know if they're going to bench their starters. There hasn't been word of that yet, but I do believe they'll take it easy on their starters. Miami has that fire trying to get into the playoffs. So I'm going to go with Miami to pull off this win.
I'm going to agree with you there, Snyder. As everyone knows, we record the show on Wednesday night, and it hasn't been announced that the Buffalo Bills are resting their starters, but I expect them to after their beatdown of New England Patriots last week. I think Miami is in a win-now mode. I guess my biggest question is, are they going to ride with Tua again, or will Fitzpatrick carry them into the playoffs?
I really want to see Fitzpatrick get that shot because I saw how disappointed he was, and we talked about it on the podcast here when he first got benched for Tua, and he had that team playing so well. And I think he deserves that shot after he's outplayed Tua and replaced Tua. I know one of them was for an injury, but multiple times in these last few weeks, and Miami just keeps winning and stays in a playoff spot. I really want to see him get the shot in the playoffs finally. And I think Miami does win this game and gets that shot in the playoffs, and we'll see who ends up starting.
I think there's an honest chance that we see both of them play in the playoffs. I mean, we've seen twice this year already that if Tua doesn't get out to the hot start that Miami wants, they just put in Fitz. And, Fitz magic works his magic and turns around the game. So I don't think that there's any guarantee that Fitzpatrick won't play in the playoffs if they do make it. I think if they go into halftime and Miami is losing, they might come out in the second half with Fitzpatrick. It could be interesting. I've never seen a team use their quarterbacks like this, but, it's the Dolphins. What are you going to say?
Especially you don't normally see playoff teams doing that, but Miami has put together a solid squad, and I'm excited to see what they do with all those draft picks this year too. It'd be nice to see them get in the playoffs and see if they can make some noise before they even really pay off a lot of those trades they made.
Yeah, Miami's definitely a fun team to watch going forward. And we'll talk about it throughout the offseason with all their draft picks. But I did see PFF on one of their shows this week did come out and say that with that projected number 3 pick from the Texans, that they should actually draft a quarterback because Tua has been pulled twice. And if you get an opportunity to take a quarterback, you do it. So that seems like an interesting thing to watch if they're really going to stick with Tua or if we have another Josh Rosen on our hands.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. But guys, let's go ahead and move on into our next game, which we have the Baltimore Ravens at the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not a very exciting game. Baltimore is 11.5-point favorites. Not only is Baltimore the better team, but they also have to play to get into the playoffs. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Baltimore in this one, guys. Do you think Cincy has any chance?
Not with Baltimore playing winning in, and Baltimore has actually been one of the better performing teams in the AFC recently, so I don't see Cincinnati having a chance despite them actually playing very well recently, and not a lot of people are going to talk about it.
Yeah, Cincinnati is on a 2-game win streak, but I think it ends this week. I think Baltimore is going to find a way to get in the playoffs. They just need a win to get in. They're not going to want to rely on the Browns or Colts having to lose. I think they clinch that spot, and they could actually be in my opinion, Tyler might disagree with me on this one, but I think they could be a dangerous team come the playoffs.
You're talking Baltimore?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Cincinnati's going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs, definitely.
Well, you mentioned other teams in there. You did mention the Colts, so I was having thrown off a little bit. But no, I do think that Baltimore can be a dangerous team if you don't realize how to play them. We saw last year that there was good teams that went up against Baltimore and they got destroyed because they didn't have the players on defense needed to be able to stop Lamar Jackson. But like I've said before, and I will continue to say, if you can find a way to shut down Lamar's run game, I think you're going to be all right. The only saving grace for Baltimore, in my opinion, is the fact that their defense is really starting to turn things around and look like the defense that we saw last year. Now, if that defense can start playing some shutdown football and keep teams that they're playing against to very low scores, I don't think Lamar's going to have to be this amazing guy, this, air it out quarterback to win. And in that case, yes, they're very dangerous.
I just think it's kind of an any given week thing for Baltimore because we saw Baltimore play Cleveland, who's a great, low key playoff team here, and they had to put up a ton of points to beat them and came back in the end and still sealed the victory. So I think it's kind of an any given week. You're not going to have Baltimore coming back from behind every single week because Lamar's not the guy I'd pick to do that, but they have the ability with how they've been playing the last few weeks.
Alrighty. Speaking of that game they came back from, let's just move on to our next matchup. As the Pittsburgh Steelers set to take on the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland are 10-point favorites, and that's probably because the Steelers came out and said Mason Rudolph will be starting. I guess they want to say Big Ben, which, he needs a little bit of rest. He's been a little up and down the last couple weeks. Cleveland needs a win to get in. I'm actually kind of surprised that Pittsburgh isn't trying to prevent Cleveland from making the playoffs because I'm not sure how it's going to balance out, but there is potential that they play each other in the wild card weekend the following week again. So maybe trying to save stuff for that week. But I'm going to go with Cleveland with no Big Ben. I think they get back on track after their loss to the Jets. Hopefully their receivers can recover from COVID, their close contacts, and they play a lot better than they did on Sunday.
I'm going to agree and go with Cleveland in this one as well. And I haven't really talked too much about it yet, but I feel like it's going to end up being something that I'll say more as we go on here and talk about starters sitting. I know Tyler's also going to be on the same page with me as he talked about this with Baltimore last year. I don't like the fact that people could be sitting, taking time off. I mean, I think it's a little different for Big Ben if he's the only guy that sits because he's older, he's a vet, he's definitely been banged up this year, but coming out rusty in a playoff game can be fatal. And I understand the Ravens had 2 weeks off because they had a bye last year and the Steelers won't have a bye this year, but it kind of scares me to see starters sitting for an entire game. I would rather see them play at least a half and stay more fresh.
Yeah, I do agree with you there in part. I like you said, the reason the Ravens came out last year in the playoffs and looked so rusty is because they benched them week 17 even though they had a bye, so they had 2 weeks off, which made no sense to me. But yeah, I do agree that I think you should play your starters a little bit, call some safer plays, even if it's just some quick routes so the quarterback can't get hit. Um, Running backs, I can see maybe resting, especially if you have a big time running back like a Nick Chubb, even though Cleveland hasn't clinched, but just using this matchup as example. I just think that resting your starters, they come into the game rusty and you're going to have some problems. If it takes too long to get your feet on the ground when you're going against one of these top AFC teams, you're never going to come back.
Yeah, I think I think it all depends on if you have that bye or not. I guess we'll talk about that later when we get to the Chiefs game. But our next game on our slate is the Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions. First off, the Couch GMs want to give out all our condolences to Dalvin Cook's father, who passed away, which will cause Dalvin Cook to miss this game. Nothing but T's and P's for his family as they go through this difficult time. But back to football, Detroit, I think they're getting their coaches back, but we saw last week that that's just one bad roster, one bad team, and Stafford's probably out again. I doubt they're not going to bring Galladay back. Detroit is pretty much already thrown in the towel for this season, so I think Minnesota gets a victory here.
Yeah, and I know we are missing Dalvin Cook, and we have seen this season that Cook has been pretty much their whole offense. But at the same time, Alexander Madison is still nothing to shy away from. He's still a very good running back. He's still a very competent running back. I think he's a guy that Minnesota can still lean on, and Detroit is still going to have to play for the run, which will open up guys like Thielen and Jefferson deep. So I definitely give the edge to Minnesota. I'm going to pick them as well.
Yeah, there's no way that you can tell me that Madison's just going to completely fall flat. I know he had one rough game earlier in the year. He's allowed that as a backup, but he's going to step in and they can still center their offense around him, similar to the way they do Cook. They've done it in the past. They'll do it again. And Detroit is absolutely in shambles. So, yeah, got to take Minnesota in this one as well, guys.
So we all agree on that one. And another team that seems to be in shambles is the former dynasty in the New England Patriots. And they get the hot Jets. Jets coming off a 2-game win streak as well. After all year we were telling you they're going at 0-16, they said not so fast. But I'm going to go back to New England on this one. I just don't see the Jets getting 3 in a row. I think New England's going to want to go out on top. Heck, there's always the Bill Belichick, New York Jets, New England Patriots drama. I guess the bigger question is Cam Newton or Jared Stidham going to be the starter?
I honestly think it would be dumb for them to play Cam Newton at this point. They should just put in Jarrett Stidham because he's a young guy who potentially could be their future, even though I don't think he is. But Cam Newton is pretty much proven he's washed up in this league. I'm not afraid to say that now because he had that struggle year in Carolina after he's trying to change his throwing motion because of his shoulder. And then he got hurt again. And then he came back this year and he still does not look great. He only had a couple of weeks that were pretty good at the beginning of the season. It might be his body wearing down on him because of the style of play he has. It could just be, I don't know what it is, but I think it's pretty much shown that he's not a starting quarterback anymore. So I don't know why they would play him.
At the same time, I can see benching Cam Newton for the backup if you believe that Jarrett Stidham is your future. If he's going to be a guy that eventually you will lean on, so you want to see what you have out of him by giving him the start. And I don't think Stidham's that guy. I think he's not that great. He hasn't shown really anything for me to be impressed by in the time that he has played. So I think that neither one of them are going to be in the Patriots' future. And if they're not going to be in the future, it really doesn't matter who they start.
Yeah, I'm only saying it because I think there's a better chance you see Stidham in the Patriots' future than in Cam Newton. But I agree. I don't see Stidham might be around as a backup. You never know, but I don't see him being their future starting quarterback either. I'm with you there.
So, guys, I know that typically I'm the one that says we've spent too long on the Jets, let's move on. And I also understand that even with their 2-game win streak, they still are well out of the playoffs. They're still a terrible team. But there is a Jet that we do need to talk about. Frank Gore is going to miss the game due to a lung contusion. That sounds painful. But, guys, if we saw the last of Frank Gore, if he is going to hang up his cleats after this season, uh, the Couch GMs, we just want to reach out and say, because we know Frank Gore is listening, congratulations on an unbelievable career, and we can't wait to see you as a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Definitely congrats on that insane longevity. I remember watching him when I was just a kid and he was balling out in San Francisco, and I did not imagine him to be around this long, yet alone be effective this long at the running back position. So props to him.
Yeah, his longevity, makes me feel like he'll be back next year, even though that is insane as that sounds. So hopefully he maybe gets one more ride, maybe go to a contender, take the Shady McCoy role, just hop on to the Bucks bandwagon or, find a contender. Just I know he likes to play, but he deserves a ring more than just about as much as anyone who's been around the league this long. So hopefully he comes back for one more season and doesn't have to end on an injury.
It's just easy for us to just kind of expect him to play next year. There's guys like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, guys like that every year we're like, is it it? Is that it? Are they going to quit? But guys like Frank Gore, you just kind of expect him to be there next year, despite his age. But even with that being said, it might be the end. And if it is, unbelievable career. And like I said, first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt.
No doubt. But 1 second before we go on to this, I do kind of want to see him get some carries next year because he's only 726 yards away from taking number 2 all time in rushing yards from Walter Payton. He's never going to catch Emmitt Smith for number 1, but it'd be cool to see him try to come back and get a couple carries just to kind of get close or maybe past that. But that's a steep hill for him at his age.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. But guys, that is 3 times the amount of time that we have spent on the Jets all season. So let's go ahead and move on to our next game. Two not very good teams, but at the same time, it could be a decent matchup, especially since we are picking this game differently. We have the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Giants. Cowboys are 1.5-point favorites. Who do you guys have to win this one?
I'm going to go ahead out here and pick Dallas. And it's interesting to note that the winner of this game would get in the playoffs if Washington loses to Philadelphia on Sunday night. So this could potentially be a playoff game for these two teams. So NFC East matchup, Dallas and New York is always pretty much competitive. And you could see them basically playing for a playoff spot, even though the whole NFC East stinks. It should be actually an entertaining game in the 1 o'clock window. And I just think Dallas's offense is starting to look like it's getting it together more. Their defense is not as bad as it was in the beginning of the season. The Giants have not been trending in the right direction, and that's why I'm going to go with Dallas.
Yep, everything you said I agree with, George. I think Dallas's offense is starting to click. I think Daniel Jones is still battling through some injuries, and Colt McCoy might be the better option at this point, but I think they're going to roll out Daniel Jones. I'm a little interested to see if there's any extra activity on the field, being that the Giants are the one that gave Dallas that unfortunate injury to Dak Prescott. See if it's a little bit more tense, maybe a couple extra personal fouls called, or and it's NFC East, and they're always a tough division. So I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll come down to the wire. It's weird to bet on Andy Dalton in a big game, but I'm going to do it and take Dallas.
Oh, you're right. I said that could be a playoff game, and it's Andy Dalton. That was not the right thing for me to say.
Yeah, guys, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Giants basically for the reason you just joked about. There's looking at how Dallas has played compared to how the Giants have played lately, the easy pick is Dallas. However, just in all the years that I've been watching football, I've seen nothing but the Cowboys choking and Andy Dalton choking. So it just seems extra fitting so that the two of them together are going to choke. No other reason am I picking the Giants than just the Dallas history of choking. But at the same time, it would be kind of funny to see the Cowboys win just because then they have to go on and cheer for the Eagles. And all these Cowboys fans that hate the Eagles with a passion that have to cheer for them, it could be pretty fun to watch.
I would honestly enjoy that as an Eagles fan. That's a great point. Makes me want to see Dallas win even more.
Weird. Now you want to see the Dallas win?
Solely for entertainment purposes, let's be honest. That and it hurts their draft pick.
That's true.
Well, let's one divisional matchup to another. Let's move on to our next matchup with the Atlanta Falcons at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay destroyed Detroit Lions last week in one half of football. It was embarrassing. They pulled Tom Brady, but that was the only one they pulled. I don't know why Mike Evans was still out there, why Chris Godwin was out there, except to help everyone who had them in a fantasy game. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe Bruce Arians had Mike Evans on his fantasy team. Probably a smart play. But I'm going to go with Tampa Bay on this one. This is another game that kind of scares me because I could see Tampa Bay just going, you know what, we're not going to play anybody, and Atlanta essentially gets the win because they're playing backups. But as of the time of recording this, that's not the case. The starters are still expected to play, so I'll go with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Cody, I'm going to also pick Tampa Bay. I don't really have anything to add there. Pretty much everything you just said is exactly what I agree with, so I'm going to go with Tampa Bay.
I'm going to go with Tampa Bay for all the same reasons, but I do think you're going to see some of their starters at least get some time. I think the whole playing a half thing that did last week with Brady might happen again, even if it is a closer game. So I'm going to go ahead and be a little bold, not only saying that Brady will play some snaps, but that him and Matt Ryan together are going to actually score 6 touchdowns. So it's going to be an entertaining, high-scoring game as well.
Okay. If it was a regular season game where I thought Tom Brady was going to play the whole one, 3 touchdowns apiece, wouldn't think that's that bold. But with Tom Brady possibly only playing a half or even at all, I like it, and I'm hoping Tom Brady doesn't play to see if Matt Ryan can get all 6 by himself.
I mean, I would take a 5-1 split for Matt Ryan there as well, but I think 4-2 is probably the most realistic outcome because of the whole Brady maybe being sat thing.
Well, we wrapped up the 1:00 games, pretty much the least important games this weekend, as since the NFL has flexed all the playoff implication games essentially to 4:00. So let's get into those games. We got a lot better matchups, and we'll start off with the NFL's longest rivalry. We got the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears. Packers are 5.5-point favorites. You all know where I'm going. I'm taking Green Bay. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I also am going to pick Green Bay, but I don't think we can count Chicago out. They are making that Cinderella story run here at the end. If Chicago can pull off this win, they do control their own destiny, and they will be in the playoffs, which is just unbelievable to think after the way this season has gone. But for that reason, it's still not enough for me to pick Chicago. I think I'm going to go with Green Bay. They are still going for that first round bye, so Green Bay all the way.
I'm going to also say Green Bay because they're playing for that 1 seed, so it's not like they're playing for nothing. But I have an interesting question for Cody here.
I'm ready.
Okay, so you were cheering last week for Mitch Trubisky because you want him to get a contract extension and stay in Chicago because you think that hurts the Bears. Would you sacrifice a win this week in hopes that Seattle loses and you get that first seed for Mitch Trubisky to get that contract extension?
Absolutely not. I never want. I'm never gonna sacrifice. I want wins every time. I don't care what the outcome is. Long-term effects. I want wins. So, as much as I would love Trubisky to stay, if this game came down to Green Bay winning and guaranteeing themselves for the 1 seed versus Trubisky staying, I'll take the 1 seed. That's one less game to play in the playoffs. So you're right. I hope Trubisky does, reach an agreement long term, because I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. He has his ups and downs, but he's not the guy like all the franchises want. So I hope Chicago pays him a bunch of money, but not at the cost of the Packers losing this game.
All right. That's what I figured you would answer, but I was just testing you a little bit.
I was going to say this is also a big game for Aaron Rodgers because it could be his 20th victory against the Chicago Bears. So just another fun little thing to watch out for this game to see if Aaron Rodgers can get win number 20 against the Chicago Bears. And the Packers just signed Snacks Harrison off of waivers on Wednesday afternoon. Could be a late season addition to help solidify that run defense, which has been the Packers' weakest point all season. So as a Packers fan, Packers Twitter has wanted Snacks all year. We finally got him. This could be a big one for us.
Well, let's hope the Packers are chewing on some snacks, maybe some cheese while they're finishing watching this game and checking out some of the other playoff outcomes. But why don't we move on to one of the few games in the 4:00 window that do not have playoff implications, and that would be the Las Vegas Raiders at the Denver Broncos. Just take a second, guys, to reflect on that Raiders loss on Saturday.
Well, I'm not a head coach, obviously. I'm sitting in my parents' basement recording a podcast with my 2 best friends. Not an NFL head coach. I have played a lot of Madden. Doesn't make me qualified to be an NFL head coach. But as an NFL head coach, I understand what Gruden was doing, trying to use up as much clock as possible. But on that 3rd down, he never should have taken a knee. That, 23 seconds and 50 seconds, the difference it would have been from scoring a touchdown or at least attempting to score the touchdown to make Miami to go all the way down instead of only going up 2 was a terrible call, and they paid for it with that blown coverage and that unintentional no-look pass because the Raiders player had Fitzpatrick's helmet on backwards because he was grabbing the face mask. So the Raiders deserve that because, you play to win the game. I mean, that's a cliche saying, but the Raiders played not to lose instead of playing to win, and they still ended up losing.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a fan, because I am also not an NFL head coach, in case anybody was curious, um, as a fan, I would rather have my team uh, with a 6-point lead and 50 seconds left to play defense over having a 2-point lead and 20 seconds of needing defense every time. Because it's so much easier to stop a touchdown from happening than it is to stop a field goal. And it's another thing if the Raiders took that knee to kick the field goal to go up by 3, so that if the Dolphins went down the field in 20 seconds and kicked that field goal, it would just tie it. That's another thing. That's a whole nother discussion. But that kick only put them up by 2. It's one of the dumbest calls I've ever seen. I've never liked John Gruden as a head coach, but even this one blows my mind.
It makes me wonder, like, I know a lot of these teams these days are hiring people to sit in the booth and literally just look at analytics and win percentages and saying, if I do this, it's going to raise my win percentage more than if I do this. Like, was that the right analytical call too? Because it doesn't seem to make sense to me, and I'm very curious as to if they have one of those guys or if he still has a job now after that.
Yeah, I don't think they were very good about putting up, Sunday Night Football. They do it all the time. If you get this conversion, you have this percentage. I don't think the broadcast did that for the Saturday night game, but I wouldn't be surprised if, it was a few percentage points higher just because sometimes analytics is a little bit skewed. But I agree with Snyder. Give me my defense with 50 seconds and no timeouts compared to 20, almost 30 seconds for only needing a field goal. We saw what happened. They had one big play and a penalty, and they were right there. You know, I just don't have words for as a Raiders fan, I'd be extremely frustrated. Um, I know I saw a stat that John Gruden, of your last 3 head coaches, has the worst winning record, and that the other 2 were fired after their 3rd season, and he has the worst winning record of the 3. Obviously, he's staying because you signed him to a 10-year, $100 million contract. So hopefully they can turn it around starting next year, but not if they continue to coach and play that way.
So, with all that being said, we all picked the Raiders to still win the game. I think it's pretty safe to say it's because of how bad the Broncos look. But, guys, we're spending a lot of time on a game that means nothing in the 4 o'clock windows. Let's go ahead and go on to a game that is a lot bigger. Really makes me excited because it's the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. And as much as the Colts are favored, if the Jags were to win this game, the Colts would be out of the playoffs. And on top of that, so if Indy still wins this game, but the Titans win, Miami wins, Baltimore wins, and Cleveland wins, all of which are favored to win these games, Indy would be an 11-win team out of the playoffs. That is insane to me, and as a Titans fan, it would be the biggest middle finger to the Colts I've ever seen, and I would love to see it. That being said, I'm picking the Colts, but boy am I hoping for a Colts loss.
I'm kind of hoping for a Colts win, but everyone else to win too, because it would be absolutely insane to see everyone that already complains about, like, say, the NFC East getting a playoff team. But before they expanded the playoffs to 7 teams, they were already complaining that there were strong teams missing the playoffs to the wild card because of what division they were in. But now you're just looking at the AFC being so deep that they're going to miss and be the 8th seed with 11 wins, and you can't really fix that by fixing the playoffs anymore.
Yeah, you're right. The only way to fix that would be going to 8 teams, which we don't need to do. We don't need to dilute the playoffs anymore. I personally think we should go back to how it was before the season, but that's another debate for another day. I am with you. I think the Colts win this game. I know Tyler's not going to like this, but I hope the Colts win this game and find a way to get into the playoffs because they're another team that I think could be scary. They have the defense. I don't love Phillip Rivers. He will be the reason that they don't make it anywhere big in the playoffs, but they could be a team that, causes some upset, makes a little bit of noise, makes a little run. but I guess I got to hope for them just to get in to even see that happen.
I hear what you're saying, Cody. And the only reason I'd be cool with Indy making the playoffs and being that scary team is if they do make it, they're likely going to be the 7th seed as long as Tennessee does win against the Texans. And if they're the 7th seed, that means in the second round, they would be the ones to face the Chiefs. And if they could somehow pull off an upset against the Chiefs because of that great defense that they have, I'm okay with that. I feel better beating the Colts than I do beating the Chiefs. Only way I'm cool with it, but honestly, I'd much rather see Colts as an 11-win team not even making the playoffs. It'd be great.
Spoken like a true Titans fan over there, but I heard you mention the Chiefs there, so why don't we move on to their matchup, which is another matchup that doesn't necessarily mean too much for the playoff picture. That is the LA Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs, and we're not going to see any Patrick Mahomes this week. That could mean 3 weeks between games for Patrick Mahomes. We had mentioned earlier about bye weeks and resting players. Do you think that is an issue?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Right now, we only know of Patrick Mahomes, but I would expect, Kelsey, Tyreek, Chris Jones, all the big name guys, to end up missing this game as well. And we saw it last year with um, the the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't play from week 16 until the divisional round of the playoffs. They came out pretty flat against the Titans. We've seen it before. One that brings to my mind is the 2011 Packers. They didn't play in week 17. They also had a bye. They came out flat against San Francisco that year in the playoffs in the divisional round. I don't have the stats in front of me on who, if you win, if you have 2 weeks off compared to if you lose, but just based off memory, I would think it doesn't favor that. So I'm a little surprised that they're not getting at least some playing time. And that's actually why I'm going to pick the Chargers to win this game, is because they won't have any of the Chiefs superstars out there. We saw Justin Herbert make it a close game when he got his first start unexpectedly way back at the beginning of the season when we were talking about how can you stab someone in the lung during a procedure, giving a shot. Uh, and he
2020's
came
been
out and
crazy.
made that game close against Kansas City. So I'm going to take the Chargers in this one. And unfortunately, with Mahomes sitting, he will also probably be forfeiting the MVP race that he was in with Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, and Derrick Henry because he won't play in Week 17.
I appreciate you including Derrick Henry in that, even though there's no chance in hell. But yes, I'm also going to pick the Chargers. I think that the Chiefs we've talked about are one of the deepest teams in the NFL. That once you stop their top 7 guys, they still have 3 or 4 more good ones that they can hit you with. But I think that Justin Herbert's going to come out firing. He's going to want to end this season on a good note. So without Patrick Mahomes, I don't trust Chad Henne. That is probably the only depth spot they don't have that's flashy at all. I'm going to go with the Chargers in this one.
Well, I mean, I am going to go against you guys and for some reason still pick the Chiefs. I know I'm tied with Cody in picks, and this might seem like a throwaway pick, which is dumb. But like you said, the only spot that they're not deep at, that I'm not comfortable with seeing a guy play, would be quarterback. And the pride of why I'm missing Pennsylvania, not far from where Tyler and I live, Chad Henne, is going to come out there and have weapons around him still and could put up enough points to beat a Chargers team that likes to find ways to lose. So because of that, I'm going to take the leap of faith and take Kansas City.
You just brought up, him being from Wyomissing, Pennsylvania. Fun fact, I don't think I've ever told you guys because we never actually really talk about Chad Henne because he's never sees the field, but his uncle was my gym coach and our gym teacher in 9th and 10th grade. Just a little fun fact.
Well, if we're going to talk about why missing fun facts for the podcast, when I played football in high school, I actually went up against a why missing football player by the name of Alex Anzalone, who is now a middle linebacker for the New Orleans Saints. So why don't we just go ahead and jump on into that matchup? We have the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. The Saints are 6.5-point favorites. Guys, I'm going to pick New Orleans in this matchup.
Yep, I'm right there with you. Carolina was able to upset the Washington football team last week, but I don't see them getting another victory this week. The Saints are still holding out hope for that first round bye, which they would need a Packers loss, but then Seattle to win the game for them to have the tiebreaker. So a lot of things they're going to be scoreboard watching. but I just think the Saints come out with a victory. I think it'll be a fun matchup. Sean Payton's going to leave all his trick plays uh, for the regular season he hasn't called yet, which is why I'll make my bold prediction for this game that Drew Brees, Taysom Hill, and Jameis Winston will all have some part of a touchdown, whether they all throw one, maybe Brees throws one to Hill, maybe Winston throws one to Brees. We don't know, but they will all have their hand in a touchdown this week. And it'll be a fun matchup in the 4 o'clock games that don't mean too much, but maybe one you'll want to keep an extra eye on.
Interesting, Cody. Very interesting, bold prediction. I like to see it.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I think we talked earlier when we were talking about quarterbacks getting switched in and out. We were talking about the Miami game, but I think in this case, with it being a team that's locked in the playoffs and just trying to get some guys some work or rest some guys, that'd be really fun to see. And even though we might see an interesting game out of the Saints, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Saints as well with you guys.
All right, we're all picking the Saints, no surprise there. So let's go ahead and move on to a different matchup, one that we are not all picking the same, and that would be the Arizona Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams. It's an interesting game because both teams might be starting their backups, and I'm not going to lie, guys, I know football very well. I study the players, and yet I don't even know the names of these backup quarterbacks. When they announce them, I've never heard of them. And on top of that, Cooper Kupp was also placed on the COVID list and might not play. So with this weird game with playoff implications, Arizona needing to win to make the playoffs, I don't know who to pick in this one. Who do you guys taking?
Well, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams. I don't know why. I'm just going to do it. I think Kyler Murray means a lot more to the Cardinals than Jared Goff means to the Rams. I think the Cardinals are only as far as Kyler Murray would take them, and we all know that Sean McVay is the engine that makes the Rams offense work. So with that said, I'm going to take John Wolford, the undrafted quarterback out of Wake Forest, to win against the divisional opponent against Arizona versus the guy that I can't remember his name, but I know he passed Brett Hundley on the depth chart, so that should mean something.
The name you're looking for is Chris Strevler, I believe is how you pronounce it. Something like that.
I'm not going to lie. I didn't want to botch his name on the podcast, so I saved it for you.
Oh, thank you. Because I'm picking Arizona. I mean, I don't really know why either, because I feel like it's a toss-up not having starting quarterbacks in there. I could definitely see why you would say Kyler Murray would have more of an effect on Arizona than Jared Goff would on the Rams. I would probably agree with you in most cases, but for whatever reason, I'm feeling Arizona. I think you got all reliable Larry Fitzgerald's going to go in there and coach up this backup quarterback and give us some easy passes, and you got a lot of other weapons around him still. Too deep at running back. The other good receivers are like DeAndre Hopkins. They're still playing for something, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick Arizona.
All right, guys, with you giving your reasons, I have decided who I'm going to choose. Cooper Kupp doesn't really make a big difference to me being on the COVID list because I've seen plenty of games this year where Kupp really isn't even that involved. They have Josh Reynolds still. They have Bobby Trees, Robert Woods. They still have the tight ends that they can use. And if the quarterbacks are out of the game, I think you got to look elsewhere on the team. So I'm going to go with the Rams to win the game because they have the much better defense. Now, I know the Cardinals have Budda Baker, who is still my defensive player of the year. But at the same time, one player doesn't make a defense. So I'm going to go with the Rams to win this game.
I think it's also, since we are taking the Rams, a good thing to point out is there probably won't be Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson, so it will most likely be the Malcolm Brown show. I believe his contract is up at the end of this year, so maybe this will be his chance to show teams what he can do as a full-time running back if he is no longer a Ram next season.
Well, all right. Why don't we stay in that NFC West division and move on to the other game, which is the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers. And the Seahawks do have a chance at that number 1 seed still with a Packers loss and a Saints loss or a tie. So with that being said, and Seattle having a lot to play for, I'm going to stick with Seattle here. I think they're the better team, especially with San Francisco still dealing with all the injuries. I am very impressed with how San Francisco handled this season, and I'm very interested to see how they go into the offseason with their quarterback situation. But that definitely means I'm not picking them here against Seattle.
I think the Packers are going to win. Maybe they have a chance to lose, but I think the Packers are going to win. I think the Saints are going to win. But at the same time, I'm still going to pick the Seahawks. I haven't been thrilled with them the last few weeks. They've really been on a downswing, but I think they're going to find that spark they need right before the playoffs, and I think they're going to pull off maybe not a handed victory, but they're definitely going to pull off a victory. I'm going with the Seahawks over the Niners.
Yeah, as much as I want the 49ers to win just so it gives us the 1 seed win or lose, I do think the Packers will pull out a victory, and I think Seattle will pull out a victory as well, making this I imagine these teams will be scoreboard watching all day, looking at each other, but I think Seattle wins, like you mentioned. San Fran has battled so many injuries. We did see George Kittle come back last week. Jimmy G won't be coming back after they talked about it this week, so it'll be another week of CJ Beathard. I don't think he has enough to get it done. I think it could be close. It could come down to, Russell Wilson making a big play at the end of the game, because I feel like Seattle San Fran always comes down to the wire. I just hope San Fran wears their really cool all white jerseys because I love those things.
You can tell that Week 17 is not a very exciting week in football when we're talking about our hopes for the week being jersey watching. Uh, it's just, it's not a very thrilling week. Usually there's some good playoff implications. This year it's not even as big, but there is still one game that is very big for playoff implications, and that is the Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. The Titans, if they win, they will clinch the AFC South for the first time since 2008. If they lose, a whole number of things could happen. If the Colts win and the Titans lose, they will clinch the South. And there are even some chances that the Titans end up as the 10-win team that fall all the way out of the playoffs in certain scenarios. So it's a very big game. It's a game that a lot of these teams in the AFC are going to be watching. And with that being said, I'm going ahead and picking my boys. I'm taking the Titans. No surprise there.
I'm going to agree and take the Titans just because I think a lot of those borderline playoff teams that we've been talking about that could make an 11 win team miss the playoffs are going to win. So Tennessee is no different. Tennessee would clinch a playoff spot and the division with that win, so they have a lot to play for against Houston, who could always pop off a good game any week, but I don't see this being that week.
Yeah, despite the Tennessee Titans getting embarrassed on Sunday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers,
Thanks for
I
rubbing
am
that
going
in.
to pick them. I had to. I couldn't go all podcast without mentioning it.
I don't blame you.
But I think Tennessee has a clear victory here. I would also not be surprised if we see Deshaun Watson not even play in this game. He hasn't been ruled out or ruled that he's going to play yet, but he is battling that elbow injury after that freak hit last week. They have nothing to play for. Their team is already completely banged up. Their defense is awful. There's no point in risking the man they just gave all the money to in Deshaun Watson. So I actually expect him to be shut down, and Tennessee is able to clinch the AFC South pretty easily.
Yeah, on top of that, guys, I think that we are going to see yet another big game from Derrick Henry. I know I sound like a broken record every game calling for a big game from Derrick Henry, but look, he's already basically guaranteed uh, being the rushing leader for the second straight year since being handed the starting role for Tennessee. It is no secret that Tennessee likes to lean on him, and it's also no secret that Derrick Henry is an absolute monster in December. So, with all of that being said, guys, the last time Tennessee faced the Texans this season, Derrick Henry ran for over 200 yards. And I think he's going to do that again. So my bold prediction is not just that he's going to run for 200 yards. It's that he's going to run for at least 223 yards. Why such a specific number, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. It's because if he rushes for 223 yards, he will break 2,000 yards for the season. He will be the 8th running back in NFL history, second in franchise history to ever do that behind CJ2K. And guys, I think he's going to get it done. I think he's going to play angry, especially with the playoffs on the line. I think with this big of a game on the line, I think you have to rely on your best player, lean on him heavily. They're not going to shy away from Derrick Henry, and the Texans have shown they can give up some rushing yards. So give me Derrick Henry to break 1,000 yards on the season.
That is very bold, having that big of a number in one game, but I know if anyone can do it, it's him and the Titans, because they like to feed him a couple extra carries to try to get him over those milestones. They did it last year with trying to get him the rushing title, so I would not be shocked for them to try to do it again. And I would hope he gets an MVP vote if he gets to that 2,000 mark. Well, more than one vote, but still.
At least one vote. That's all I'm asking for, guys. Just one.
Hey, it could happen. My only concern with your bold prediction is that he doesn't even play the second half, because as much as they want to get him stats, I could see the Titans being up 4 touchdowns in the first half, and they're like, okay, Jerry McNichols, Deontay Foreman, go out there and have fun, because I just don't think Houston's a very good team right now, and they're going to really regret not having a top 5 pick that they traded for Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills, who's not even on the team anymore.
I agree they're not a very good team right now. It's just, like I said before, it's a divisional thing that anytime you face a divisional opponent, it's up in the air what could happen, which makes this week at least a little bit interesting because week 17 is all divisional games. And at the same time, the Texans always seem to play the Titans tough, no matter how good either team is. And there's another little wrinkle to this story, guys. Steven Gostkowski, the horrible, horrible kicker for the Titans, and Brett Kern, the amazing punter for the Titans, both have been placed on the COVID list. So we might have to run our FedEx punter out there. We might have to see if FedEx can deliver a kicker for us as well. And we might have no kicking in this game.
I forgot about the FedEx punter.
You know, it's funny that we got a punter from FedEx when Arthur Smith, our offensive coordinator, his dad is actually the founder of FedEx.
A little inside track.
I was waiting for you to say UPS, and I was going to be like, whoa.
No, I think his dad was like, hey, we got this guy down at the office who can kick real well. You need to try him out. And it's like, fine, Dad. It had to be one of those situations. I don't see any other way that this horrible FedEx punter got a job.
So the offensive coordinator's dad is controlling the special teams on the Titans. That's one way to run a franchise right there.
Yeah, why not? What do we got to lose? We're a small market team.
Hey, they're doing a better job than the teams of our next matchup, well, at least one team, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, they've had some questionable draft decisions. Maybe they should, ask the parents of the players. Maybe they have some connections, because they haven't seemed to be hitting on any draft picks as of late against the Washington football team, who that franchise has been a joke for years, but maybe Ron Rivera is turning it around. And I don't understand how this game got flexed to Sunday night. Imagine if Kyler Murray and Jared Goff were, healthy. That game would have been on Sunday night. They just didn't want to put 2 unknown quarterbacks in the spotlight. And we talked about Dwayne Haskins being released. So right now it looks like Tyler Heineke's in line to start. Alex Smith's still dealing with that injury. But their defense is just too good for me to pick against them at the moment. Oh, his name's Taylor. I see.
Taylor.
Your name's Tyler.
My name is
His name's
Tyler.
Taylor. Too many T's around here. Too many T's. Washington football team, they got a T in their abbreviation. I can't handle it. But I'm still going to take the Washington football team. I think we saw the Cowboys, start to rein in Jalen Hurts a little bit. They seem to be able to find a way to slow him down. I think the football team's defense is a lot better. And George, you might even be rooting for a loss at this point, because Philadelphia has fallen apart for so far. But like I said, they can't draft, so who wants a better draft pick? But give me Washington football team.
Cody, I love how you said maybe a parent needs to come in here and draft for the Eagles. I think that's a terrible idea, because the Eagles have a bad history of players' moms stepping into the team and causing drama. Do you guys remember the Dream Team with Vince Young?
I mean, that's one thing that came to mind. The other one was Donovan McNabb's mom in Campbell's soup commercials.
That's where I thought you were going.
That's exactly.
No, those are good commercials. I love those commercials. It was just the whole Vince Young's mom coming in to yell at the team for not playing her son. Like, that's as sad as it gets, especially for a dream team. But I'm going to go with Washington in this matchup. I know the only thing interesting about this game is the fact that whoever wins between the Giants and Dallas will be rooting for the Eagles to win. so that, the winner actually makes the playoffs. But I don't see it happening. I think Washington's the better team out of all four, and I think they're going to, pull off this matchup as well, even with Tyler Heineke, whoever it is. I still think even with him, they're going to pull off this victory. Eagles are just lost as a franchise. Again, the coaching decisions for the Eagles have frustrated me all season. How do you have Deshaun Jackson have an 81-yard touchdown early in the game and look that good, and then you basically take him out of the game? Makes zero sense to me. Coaching's going to be the death of the Eagles. Give me Washington.
So I get everything you're saying, but there's one way that the Eagles can win a game and still lose, it is this game for multiple reasons. One, you already talked about them hurting their draft pick. If they lose this game, they have a chance to get a top 5 pick. They're currently sitting at 6. If they win, they can fall all the way to 10. I think they need to have as high a pick as they can because they're not great at drafting, so you get a better chance of getting a stud easily. Number 2, I picked Dallas to win earlier. I really think that's going to happen. If you had to pick a team for Eagles fans to see go into the playoffs from this division, it would be Washington. So for you to say, oh, we're not going to let Washington in the playoffs by beating them, but let Dallas in, that's just another way to frustrate your fans. So I think the Eagles win this game and in the end lose even more.
And you probably lose too for this game.
Yeah,
So
the picks, whoever is the loser of the season picks could come down to Washington and Philly. It could come down to George betting on his Eagles.
I like it. I way to stick with your team, George. I appreciate, at the end of the day, we're just huge fans. We like to call ourselves Couch GMs because we think we know more about the team than they do, even though we probably don't. So I like you sticking with your team, ride or die, no matter the circumstances.
There's plenty of times I thought they would have lost, but I mean, if you're going to tell me against Washington, who may be a playoff team but is not a great one, it's a winnable game with them playing a little bit better under Jalen Hurts. So definitely got to ride with them, especially because it would help ease the pain a little bit if it helps me win these picks this week.
Alrighty, well, I think that wraps up Week 17. A lot of playoff implications are on the line. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. Like we mentioned at the top, if you're in a fantasy matchup and it's Week 17 and this is your championship week, or you have the weird it's 2-week championships, talk to your commissioner in the offseason, get them to change it. Hey, if it's Week 17 this year, keep it in Week 17 next year when there's 18 weeks. Don't play because we've already seen how many people are starting them. If you had Mahomes all season, well, you're not going to get them this week. But with that said, if you are in a fantasy matchup this week, we're still here for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'll be able to answer them on all our social medias. But that pretty much wraps up this week's episode. So as always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. You can find us on social at the Couch GMs. And please leave a comment, like, and review.
Yeah, guys, the regular season might be winding down to a close, but it is never too late to get involved with the podcast. Let us know who you would have picked in these matchups. Let us know if we helped lead you to a fantasy championship, or maybe our advice hurt you. Probably didn't, because we're amazing. But either way, guys, reach out to us, get involved. It's more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
And thank you again for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. We will be back at you next week with some wild card breakdowns and our predictions on how the playoffs are going to go. So don't worry, we're not going anywhere even though the regular season's winding down. So for Tyler, Snyder, and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we will still see you all next week.
Boom.